Me in the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let's see, our student board members are not present, but all 5 of the voting board members are present. And it looks like a full complement of our staff. So that's great. Thank you all for being here. I know you all have very busy days and this can be an exhaustive event. So we'll see how it goes. With that, I will turn it over to Nellie to introduce the study session.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. First of all, welcome. And we will be conducting our annual review of our comprehensive high schools. I wanted to note that for the board that this team has been having these conversations for quite a while now. They've had several meetings in discussion and preparation, and there's so much that goes on behind the scenes that is part of the process that actually helps us serve our students in a more full and robust way. So I wanted to just thank them as they get ready to present today, and I look forward to the conversation. And with that, I'm going to introduce our Associate Superintendent, Terry Bott. Terry, thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Like Dr. Meyer, I am very excited and thrilled to have our presentations from our sites today and appreciate all the work that you do as administrators and then the extra many hours that you put into preparing for today. Our sites were encouraged to explore the following prompts in their presentation while including data, pictures, experiences, and talking about how they support all students from AP to Gen Ed to AVID to CSACE, etc. The prompts that they were asked to explore were analyze and reflect 1 or 2 highlights of your school's progress and the impact on student learning. Share with us a couple of programs of support that your school offers and highlight some of the challenges that you're facing and or some of the proud points that you have. With these broad stroke prompts, the sites were given their autonomy on how they wanted to present to you based on what their school was doing and how they felt best to capture their thoughts under these prompts. So you will see slightly different versions of their presentation, all while the umbrella of these prompts. The sites tend to go every other year, first and second, and so I am excited and honored to welcome Mountain View up to the table, and we will kick it off with Mountain View High School. And as they approach their panel table, we will ask, just in the sake of time, since we do have a time frame of which we need to close, that we try to give each presentation roughly 35 to 40 minutes. That allows for transition time, the other school to have the same talk time, and then before we know it, our time will be done today. So thank you, Mountain View, and I'll give you the clicker.
Good afternoon. Thank you, board members, Dr. Meyer, and executive cabinet. I am first and foremost so very grateful to be here. As you all know, I started my new position in July, and since that day, I have had nothing but wonderful experiences, thanks to all of you. And I also wanted to give a big shout out to the Los Altos team, which has been so incredibly generous with her time and information and knowledge. So I want to thank her for all that hard work, as well as her team who has been supporting us. Okay.
What's the computer?
Okay, we'll just say. So this presentation is we organize this in 3 parts. First part is the year-end review, which will give you a general items that we've been working on. Second part is exciting happenings. And we chose to focus in that section what we've been doing in terms of instruction, as well as support for our historically underserved students. And then looking ahead, we'll feature a couple of exciting new programs that we've been working on. So our hearing review, we organize this into 3 distinctive sections. The first is some of the positive school culture focused activities that we have been engaged in. Since the first week, we have worked very hard, as in our team, as well as our staff, worked very hard to ensure that all our students have something to look forward to at school, because we believe that when they find something, an affinity group and or caring adult, they're more likely to be academically successful. So we've been focusing on a lot of student events, as well as engaging the parents. So you see the picture where you see our back to school night, freshman ice cream social, and incredibly large student section that came out to our games. They continue to show up, as well as our monthly Spartans Pause event, and teachers participating in Spirit Week dress up and PK graduation. So we're very excited that we're continuing to celebrate our positive school culture. Next, you see some of the instructional activities that we've been engaged in, and Mrs. Quinones will describe a little more as to what we've been focusing on. We visited lots of classrooms, we as in our admin team, as well as our coordinators, and she will explain more on that. And you can see Ms. Bott and the district admin also have been coming to our site to ensure that our students are getting the highest quality instruction in the classroom. And in the top middle, you see a science class with our honors biology freshmen. And also we have our special education programs that are robust and focused on engaging our students into the community. Bottom row, you see our students participating full array of our visual performing arts. So I'm very proud to say that our students, when they come to Mountain View High School, they understand that they will be given instructional opportunities in all types of instructional settings. What I noticed about our students in particular, because I'm new to the community, not only they're incredible scholars, they're also very generous and very involved with our school community beyond just their school community, but also our surrounding neighborhoods. So you see that we have invited our partner school, elementary school in the neighborhood on the top left, where they're learning to speak Spanish, and they came to participate in our Los Dia de Muertos event. Did I get it right? Yeah. And then also our ASB students up on top middle went to middle school to talk about United Against Hate event. And we just did the TEDx event. You see that on top right-hand corner. At the bottom, you see that our folklorico dancers went to our elementary school to perform. We invited Littlest cheerleaders, future Spartans, to come and perform with our cheerleaders, and also we hosted blood bank. I mean, I can show hundreds of pictures of what our students been involved in, but in these 3 areas where we are very proud to say that we're enhancing our vision statement in helping our students to participate in the greater democratic society. So in the next section, Ms. Quinones will explain some of the instructional practices that we have been engaging to make sure that every student has access to highest quality instruction.
Thank you, Dr. Glazier. So as we hone in on instructional practices, one of the ways that we've honed in is by doing school-wide walkthroughs with our site leadership team, and this is to observe what's going on in the classroom. So we're really proud to say that there's been over 100 observations in classrooms happening in the fall semester alone. And this has helped us collectively gather some really invaluable data and have some really rich conversations as part of our site leadership team. So another point of pride is that all of our coordinators, that's 18, representing 18 coordinators across all of our departments, have observed teachers in their own departments. And they have observed about 2 or 3 classrooms at a minimum. The administrative team collectively has observed over 50 classrooms, and we have also done walkthrough observations with our IST support team. So collectively, that's over, that helps us reach the 100 observations that I discussed. And as I mentioned, there was really rich feedback brought to the site leadership team table. And overall, the feedback was that these observations were incredibly helpful to everyone. The one point that they would like to improve upon is the observation tool. So they would like us to move toward a tool that helps us gather information on how we better support our English learners in particular, as it pertains to differentiation and scaffolding. And that one hits element 3.6 of the CSTP rubric. So we're excited to change our tool for the future and help us gather information in support of our English learners in the future. Another really great resource that the IST team brought was the Apples training, which you might be familiar with. It's a round of after-school professional learning, and we've engaged with our staff in several of those. The most recent one, for example, was on structured student talk, and that was attended by all departments as well. And we continue to hone in on our school-wide literacy practices, not just in support of our English learners, but in support of all of our students. So the instructional practice in the English department is something that we also really want to highlight as a point of pride. And these slides show in particular how the English department uses evidence and the cycle of inquiry to accelerate learning in all of our students. And one of the things in particular that they've been working on is progress monitoring. So on the left-hand side, you can see how the department has used data, in particular, the STAR Renaissance and the SBAC interim data points, to ensure that all of the subgroups are making adequate progress and specific gains as it pertains to some of the learning standards that they're targeting. And they're using that data to create an accelerated learning cycle. And that's what you see on the right. It's the cycle of inquiry. So all of this data crunching has led the English department to discover that students actually need the most support in evidence-driven analysis for nonfiction text. And so that is a standard that they will continue to work on as they offer more targeted supports for all students. And the last piece on instructional practices that I wanted to highlight was our staff meetings and a little tweak that we made. And this was to try to elevate some of the great things that are happening on our campus. So this is a picture you see of our December staff meeting, where we invited the AVID department to highlight, in particular, focused note-taking, which, as you might know, is an AVID strategy. And they presented at the staff meeting to all staff. And to be honest, it was a refresher for a lot of teachers. And for some, it was also maybe the first time they'd seen focused note-taking strategies. And the benefit of presenting to all staff is that really we believe that all students can benefit from this strategy. So we're really trying to leverage our time together to highlight these strategies in support, again, of all of our students. And with that, I'll pass it on to Mr. Robel.
So I was just gonna give you a brief overview of social studies because they are as well engaged in professional learning, specifically with evidence-based writing as well as common rubrics. So you can envision how that would support the work of the English team as well. Specifically in math, I can speak to that because I'm the administrator that works directly with the math department, and we're engaged in professional learning surrounding its math practice standard 1. It's persevering through a problem and being able to make sense of it. Really finding tasks that really go, I want to say, just deep into a problem. Because when we face an obstacle, a problem, a setback, we freeze and stop. But we want to persevere and truly understand its beauty of mathematics, because it is, for everyone that doesn't like math. Mathematics is beautiful, and there's always a solution and a rationale. However, we're engaged in that work, just trying to understand just its whys behind it and find avenues to have a light bulb really kick in. Supporting that work is SBAC interim assessment blocks too. We're really just diving into its performance tasks that have a multi-layered step to a mathematical problem. However, that's not what I'm here to talk about. I'm here to talk about our CSA students. Our CSA students, as you know, is comprehensive, coordinated comprehensive early intervention systems of support. You know that we've been working with now our 3rd group. We have over 70 students in our 3 groups. The ongoing work has paid off. 80% of our students are passing this first semester with above a 2.0. To be, I guess, flagged to be in this group, it says a lot that we've been able to increase our students to be 80% above a 2.0. And so huge work of the whys behind this, but I'm going to continue to read this data before I explain the work behind. 20% of our students are continuing to have challenges, and that major challenge is chronic absenteeism. Our students that are struggling, we're struggling to seek out and find at home and going out to the house. Our students that are struggling academically is because of the absenteeism.
Could I just interrupt
Yes,
for
sir.
a point of clarification? These percentages, do they refer to just the CCEIS students? Thank you.
Yeah, 73 exact. And so the work behind, we know that there's paid off when we have an adult connect with the student. And so we've had a huge shift with counselors this past few months, checking in with students every few weeks, every up to 6 weeks. We ask counselors to check in at least 3 times early fall. And so it's paying off. As well as we had a reclassification ceremony, and 4 of these 23 students, not all of them, but 4 of our 23 were able to reclassify as English proficient. And I can explain it more, but I don't believe you know.
Sorry, I have a question. So
Yes.
what did those numbers look like last year?
I'm going to turn it over to.
Okay, last year at this time, I would say it was pretty similar, I think slightly higher, because I think we were coming post-pandemic and we had some better attendance last year. And now that we're 2 years into attendance, our chronic, we're starting to see that pattern kind of swing back a little bit. We also had a shift in numbers because some of our CSA students moved to Los Altos when we did the changeover for ELD being offered at the Los Altos site.
Thank you.
And as we learn more, as we all speak today, you'll hear of intervention systems that are also in place, and this McGurk will share specifics of that. Interventions that are in place to support our CSAs as well as all students. And I also wanted to put a shout out for our credit recovery pilot, thanks to the Superintendent Meyer, as well as the approval of the work that's piloting this summer aimed at recovering credits specifically for CSA students, but also for all students. The software, Apex software that we're putting into place is going to pay off, we believe. And we can speak more to that if you have questions.
On the chronic absentee, so 20%, so that's is that so 20% of the chronic absenteeism, so about 15 students we're talking about then roughly?
Yeah.
So what do you understand is like the primary, is it happening more with at the 9th grade, 10th, 11th, 12th? Do we understand when this is happening in their high school years?
I can
ask,
ask Ms. McGurk specifically oversees our attendance, so
So if you look at our attendance data on Data Zone, you can see the chronic absentee rates rise over time. And it's, I think, what at least some of us would expect. We come to high school and we're excited and it's new and it's bright and shiny. And then we see those rates rise. And there's a host of reasons in our research with students as to why that is, ranging from mental health to I need to work in order to support my family, to school as it exists in its present form doesn't feel like a place where I belong. And so I think it's a myriad of things that contribute to that. So I'm excited, and I don't want to tread on Ms. Morelli's space before we get to my part, but I'm excited to tell you a little bit about some of the things that we're doing with the hopes of mitigating and ameliorating there.
So specifically for our CSA students, we're going to continue to support and intervene, and we intend, I assume this is going to continue to improve, especially with our credit recovery system that's going into place.
Yeah, and I actually did ask earlier, I know it's on the agenda, or future agenda item, to look more closely at chronic absenteeism. So,
I have one other question too. Can you hear me? That has to do with the interaction between you all and your CSIS students and say changing over to Alta Vista, or if it's not, like you said, suiting them in the traditional classroom environment, would they go over to would they want to switch to a different program?
So we have a section toward the end of our presentation dedicated to what we're doing in terms of MTSS and our intervention system. So I ask that board gives us Mrs. McGraw a chance,
All right,
and then we'll be happy to answer all questions. So now we're going to turn it over to Mrs. Morelli. What we're looking ahead, we've thought of that work. How do we create a system of support for all kids so that they want?
Good afternoon, everyone. I have the pleasure of talking about career and technical education. Here you'll see all the industry sectors that career and technical education offer. These are approved by the state of California. The ones highlighted in orange are the pathways that we're currently offering at our site, Mountain View High School. These are particularly were our focus this year because they were either pathways that we already had established but just needed to develop further, or for the new pathways based on our labor and industries data for the county, were considered to be the most what's the word I'm looking for? The most promising, yeah, thank you, for future jobs for students. So here they're listed in terms of pathways. So we have information and communication technology that was already existing, and we just cleaned up the course titles so it aligns with the state. Information and communication technology, health science and medical technology. And we have that in both patient care as well as mental and behavioral health for the coming year. Business and finance, and then finally work experience for students who work or are hoping to work, so that they have an opportunity to earn elective credits while they're working as well. Thank you.
All right. And so I think Ms. Morelli offers a really nice segue in to my section, which deals with our MTSS implementation. And in some of those conversations with the students who are chronically absent, one of the things that they shared is, I need a reason to want to show up to school. I know it seems oversimplified to those of us who enjoy school very much, but for many of our students, having an avenue like some of the CTE pathways that Ms. Morelli shared is one way of a myriad that we start to combat our issues with chronic attendance. And so, oh no. Okay, Had to pause. All right, so you can see up here as we continue to roll out MTSS, these are some of the systems that we are discussing and currently working on implementing. And we're moving toward that more fully next year. But that said, of the 4 kind of critical areas in MTSS, we are working on implementing our attendance interventions first, given what you've already heard today, that chronic absenteeism is one of our greatest challenges on site. I and other members of Los Altos' administration, as well as our district as a whole, are currently involved in an attendance community of practice countywide. And so I can share to you that these challenges that we're facing are not unique to MVHS or MVLA. This is a much larger scale issue. So we have to combat that, or at least to begin, we've engaged our site leadership team, our school site council, our faculty and staff. We've engaged families, and then of course we've engaged students in developing a tiers of intervention system that we hope can be proactive, systematic, and responsive to the needs of our students and their families. And our goal is obviously to stop chronic attendance from developing into severe chronic attendance, because, you know, it goes without saying, if you are not attending school, not only are you not accessing your education, but you're also not accessing any of the other services that we provide for students at every tier in the pyramid.
Is there a link to GPA that, let's say, if they see it progressively, if you can see it progressively getting worse from 9th grade, that it's those students that are going to be, or I don't know whether that's a link or not, because you mentioned.
And now, yes,
have to work, then that's
right, and that's another layer. So in terms of correlation, I am married to a statistics teacher, so I'm always very mindful of using terms that might get me into trouble. But if you read the literature and the research, there is most definitely a very strong correlation between attendance and GPA. And then, you know, then therefore access to graduation.
right. So, so is there any way we can correlate that starting in 9th grade and saying, okay, it's these students that we can slowly start saying we need to do that intervention at that time, right? That, you know.
Yes. No, I see your question.
Right,
so,
you know, we can catch it at the butt.
Intervene.
Earlier.
Yes.
As some type of support that whatever is needed at that time.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the, you know, challenging but exciting things about the work that we're doing right now is realizing what's effective with our 9th graders, so we can stave off some of those issues that are now, you know, relatively significant, especially for our juniors and seniors. So there's a lot of learning and data gathering and reflecting to assess what's effective, what's ineffective, and then how can we replicate that in future years.
I have a question. So, can you get I notice you track Fs. Or could you give me some insight onto the Ds? Is that also due to chronic absenteeism? And therefore, for the next review cycle, could we see how many? I noticed you had it by courses, but could we see how many students are getting have no Ds? Because I know D is technically passing, but it's actually not acceptable for A through G requirements. And as you know, our board goal is to have all of our students meet A through G requirements if that's what they wish to do. So I think that would be helpful to look at that data, at least for me.
Absolutely. That data is absolutely accessible. We would be very happy to share that next time.
And that's something that we can collect centrally and make sure that you have it. And I believe it is also in the packet. But we can definitely look at that because that correlates, of course, to A through G.
Yeah, it's per course, but if I could just see the overall number, I think that would
Okay.
be helpful to me to look at sort of. Because I am a data person, but I was trying to add up, all, because it's
a lot of data.
I'm also double dipping because I don't know how many, each student, it might be the same student taking the same class or taking different classes and getting Ds in each one. So knowing the individual students rather than the courses would also help me.
Absolutely. Thank you. And so our work with intervention or with attendance intervention has really been an all hands on deck approach. And I think that's something that's potentially been lacking in the past. So as opposed to everything being concentrated under administration, it really is now a team approach that involves outreach from our ELD department, our school counselors, our special education case managers, and then of course our administration team. So with more people invested and aware of the severity of the problem, we also have more folks in the mix to provide interventions and support. And as I think all of us can appreciate having that trusted adult, having someone who notices when you're not there and reaches out is no small thing. And I would like to give a huge acknowledgement to our partners at Los Altos, from who did a lot of learning and research on the system that we've kind of adapted and modified for our own use. But I think this is really a space where that collaboration and exchange of ideas and healthy discussion has helped both sites in moving forward. And so we really are looking forward to continuing to build out our MTSS interventions to continue to support student achievement, engagement, success, and then well-being overall.
I have one more question.
Yeah, of course.
And that is the word referral. Back in the
Yep.
first one, referral to who? And that's the one chart I would like to see sometime is student A has this problem. He goes to the teacher, notices, he refers to the counselor. The counselor solves it, or he refers it up. At what point does each person move to which thing? Kind of in a continuum.
Okay, so you are, just so I can clarify, because that's certainly something we can produce, looking for sort of a flow chart of sorts.
Yeah.
Is that?
Yeah, I'm a software engineer.
Yeah,
I used to do flow charts.
I like it.
But in concept, it all sounds great, but then does this person say, oh, it's not my problem, I'm referring to them? Or does the person
I see
say,
what you're
oh, I
asking.
do this, but not that? I mean, what's the continuum and how do you meld it so that
Got it.
it goes through and nobody is left to, oh, you go see them?
Yeah.
Kind of situation.
No, I see your question. And so at the end of every week, we are provided with attendance data from our attendance clerk in the form of reports. And so at level 1, that is a phone call home from, for example, your case manager, your school counselor, your.
Yeah, I don't need to know it all.
Okay.
Now. I'm just saying.
The
at some
global.
point, I'd like to have a more
granular
understanding of
Got it.
who does what and how the continuum works.
Got it. I would be
So
super
that's
happy
the
to
chart
provide
you
that.
see at the bottom. Yeah.
Maybe
So-
you want it in a different
Yeah,
format.
but,
Less word, fewer words and more.
continuum.
Yeah, I get you. I got it.
And not just in attendance though, because I'm kind of thinking more broadly
The bigger
of
picture.
any mental health issue, which I think attendance is.
Yep, it can be absolutely.
And I would imagine you would go back and forth,
Yeah.
depending on
Yeah.
what the topic is.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think the community feedback I've gotten is that there aren't enough academic counselors, and I think there is perhaps not a good understanding of where you go beyond the academic counselor if you want tier 1 support. So I think a flow chart would also be helpful for the community, particularly parents. And so they understand, I go here.
No, that's super helpful feedback. Thank you so much.
One question I
Yeah,
have, and it might be under the tier 3, and I'm not sure if you're gonna go with this, just how we're using, if at all, any of the CTE work, and leveraging that to serve as a way to address maybe some of the chronic absenteeism, and present to students post-secondary options that may not be, the A through G 4-year pathway.
So
that we
you
often
see
center.
the pyramid on the bottom right, that is actually exactly the work that we have begun and will continue to refine. If you look at the tier 2, it's kind of tiny, but you see that there is academic intervention as well as behavior intervention side by side in two chunks. And that's exactly where CT can fit. Yes, of course, it is a primary function of a school to provide 80% of our students with the highest quality instruction. But by offering CTE courses, we're trying to invite more students into our higher level academic environment that directly connects to their future job market. So that is part of our MTSS work. That's why you cannot really have a robust multi-tier system of support without a strongest academic program. That's why we are working on both of those things. Does that answer your question?
A little bit, I just can't see the chart, so.
Yes, we have a larger chart that we can show with you.
When you said it, sort of says it does, except I would like to say dash teacher, dash counselor, who does these things? You are doing them,
Yeah.
but who's doing them? And then if it doesn't work out, who else is doing them?
Yes, we do have an additional flow chart. So
Yeah. So
that
that's
we're
the
working
kind of
on. Yes,
detail I would like to see.
yes, yes, we have it. Yeah, we just didn't put it on here because it's just supposed to be overview.
Yeah, I know,
Yes.
but yeah.
All right, and then also in the MTSS space in terms of wellness, student health and wellness, we are very, very excited thanks to gracious funding from Dr. Meyer and her office, and with the support of the Board of Trustees. We are super excited to pilot our wellness space, the Spartan Spot, starting in just the end of this month. And so we are, as you all know, because you see the construction on the student services building, we are looking forward to our more permanent wellness space being ready in August of 2023. But this pilot program is going to enable us to collect valuable data about students' needs, about the efficacy of the design of our pilot program, and then to prepare us even further as we refine those systems and transition to our more permanent space and our bigger space. So we are very, very much looking forward to and enjoying developing those systems that support wellness for all students. And the Spartan Spot is designed, at present to be a drop-in and calming space, which serves humans. We could all use a little calming in our lives, no matter who we are and what we bring to the table. But we're also very excited about the prospect of more preventative wellness services and equipping students with some of those self-regulation skills, coping skills and resiliency that then takes strain off of our tier 3 services. So it's early days yet, but we will be excited to share more of our data and our experiences when we are back here later this year. And so I would now like to turn it back to Dr. Glazer for some closing remarks.
Thank you, Mrs. Becker. So I added 2 pictures, and all this work cannot be done by ourselves or alone in the classroom. So I wanted to thank my team for pulling this presentation together and working with me on a daily basis. And the picture on the right from my, and you will see that that is a group photo that we took together at the opening of our new auxiliaries gym. And I just wanted to thank the board and then the cabinet and Dr. Meyer for your continued support. And I cannot wait to return in June to tell you all about what great work we've been able to do with our students after graduation. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions?
Yes, so come back to Daniela. So you mentioned evidence-based reading and nonfiction is something that needs to be emphasized more. Can you kind of explain how would it be different than what we're doing today? What does that, how would it look different?
I'm happy to chime in and if others want to as well. I don't think that it's doing anything different in the sense that the data allowed the department to realize kind of the what, and then open opportunities as course teams to figure out the how they're going to address it. So rather than addressing things broadly, they could hone in on that standard and then think about ways in which they can offer interventions to target that standard specifically. Does that make sense?
And I'll say, as a former English teacher, I think, you know, there's a balance on literary analysis. And I think striking the balance in the English classroom between literary analysis and nonfiction. You know, historically, if you take back when I started teaching, it was all literature all the time. And we're fortunately moving in a direction of greater balance, and the skills and the strategies that you use to analyze nonfiction, while similar to analyzing fiction, you know, there are structural differences that I think that's one of the really exciting things that the English department has identified, because as not that we don't all enjoy reading fiction for pleasure, I hope, but I think most of the reading we do in our adult lives does tend to be nonfiction. So I think this is really enabling our English teachers to equip students, no matter who they are, to go out into the world and be ready with those 21st century skills.
Okay, so let me, if I can just, I have to think in some practical terms. So are you thinking that we would emphasize more reading of newspaper articles, periodicals, things of that nature that journalists have written about, you know, some subject that's happening out there, and analyzing that, not necessarily autobiography type of nonfiction,
Yeah.
but more on the
Yeah.
kind of periodical type of
And
idea of nonfiction.
Yeah, the English department has done a really beautiful job finding complements in nonfiction, those shorter pieces that, again, we all read on a regular basis, that complement that the existing fiction in the curriculum. So again, I think they are really working very hard to strike that balance between those two and afford students the ability to hone both sets of complementary skills.
Yeah, and so what is it about then? I guess we understand, what is it about nonfiction then that you think needs to be emphasized? Well, what is that that's not in fiction, I guess?
So the way
What is
that they arrived at this conclusion is based on the SPEC interim assessment as well as the Renaissance reading test. And each and every single one of those questions are aligned to a particular set of standard in terms of content as well as skills development. So what they recognized was that our students needed a little more precise reading and interpretation of data and information so that they're able to articulate what they have learned, which had been a part of their instructional practices, but not necessarily so visible that student could understand that what we're learning in class is for this particular way of expressing what you learn. So they created and developed different types of assessment as well as instructional practices so that they make the student learning visible. And they're doing great work with I mean, when they meet together as a course team, each course team is really focused on that skills development, which I think is much more needed now more than ever before due to the volume of the information they have to consume.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you.
I would add on top of that, that you need to explicitly teach the academic language and vocabulary. And so in literature, you can gather a lot through the context, but you have to explicitly teach it. And just the ratio of technical terms versus general terms that are used in conversation is completely different for nonfiction. So academic language is much, as you stated, it's much more difficult to read. You have to read it a little bit more slowly. And then also Marty just hit it, that it's a good reminder, because as English teachers, we think our ratio is even, but we really lean towards the literature. But that quality of instruction, explicit technical terms, and it's some memorization.
May I also add, what about fact checking and truthfulness
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
what you think is nonfiction but is true?
Absolutely.
Is that
and-
covered too?
Yeah, our librarian does such a great job. She doesn't get lots of recognition, but Mrs. Lamarche, I've worked at many schools, and she is one of the best collaborator of our teachers, so that I've seen her create these media literacy lessons that are top notch to ensure that even our newcomers are getting exposed to how to do research and how to understand what facts are, all the way to our high performing AP students. And library has a lot of resources and she is able to provide.
I had a question about the wellness center. I understand it's a pilot, and when I hear drop-in, I hear like self-referral. And obviously that's kind of the first phase of any pilot. Are you going to be working on the sort of like referral process, like a teacher or some other adult referring saying, hey, you need a break, why don't you go to the Spartan? Sorry, I forgot the name already. The Spartan.
The spot. No, that's a super great question. I'm so glad you asked. So we actually, so all students who come to the Wellness Center, or the ones who are coming from a class period, will need to come with a pass. And that can be, so part of this is teacher education and staff education. You know, sometimes students will know they are dysregulated, and sometimes a teacher will notice, like something seems a little bit off today. Why don't you take 10-15 minutes? Here's a path to the spot, so that the student has the ability to be, to gain some of those skills before returning successfully to instruction. So, and I think that has been, to be candid, I think that has been something we've had to think really carefully about, because obviously if I put my teacher hat on, I don't want students to leave my class and go elsewhere. I want them to remain in my classroom. And so I think it's really been incumbent on us to demonstrate and to continue to demonstrate that if we can help students, find calm, regulate their emotions, they will be able to be more successful in class, and then also less disruptive to the learning of others. But I think that is, with anything new, that's going to be an ongoing process. Then we have, staff are all over the place in terms of the continuum of wellness. So I think the education campaign is essential for us in getting more kids to us than just the ones who would self-refer. So it is something that we have to think about super carefully.
Thank you.
Of course.
Any other comments, questions? Okay, I have something. So you talked about nonfiction and the balance in the English department. It strikes me that other departments have a duty in analyzing nonfiction.
Absolutely.
And in particular, the different subjects require different degrees and techniques of analysis to understand what's going on. You can't read a math book at the same pace you can read a history book. And you can't read a history book at the same pace you can read a work of literature or a magazine article for that matter. So there are all sorts of techniques involved, and I want to know whether this is an integrated effort. Are the departments getting together and saying, hey, we do this, you do that?
I'm going to yield to our two professional learning leads because literacy is a core focus for instruction and professional learning.
So yes, we routinely meet with our site leadership team, which is on Thursday afternoon. And we've been working on how to develop school-wide literacy goals and what each department role is in developing that as a team. So that is yielding to our staff presentation that you saw. The ABIT strategy presentation came out of their need to say, okay, what is the one singular strategy that all students can use in every class in support of our school-wide literacy goals? So yes, that work is happening, and that has been our focus for every PL day that we have had, and we will continue to do that. We believe in literacy being the foundational skill for every single student, no matter what academic achievement level they're currently at. So our site leadership team is very focused on that.
Good to hear. Okay,
Actually,
Sandra.
one last question. And I'm going to ask this for Los Altos as well. Chat GPT. Are you seeing any student responses with Chat GPT? So I'm just curious to see what's happening in our schools.
Can I take this? So I was very, very fortunate to be in a teacher's classroom observing and watched him do a brilliant lesson that was actually course team wide on Chat GPT, the ethics of using it, when it could be effective, when it would be counterproductive or unethical. And it was fascinating to watch the students engage. And I think this ties so beautifully to our vision statement into the ethics of why do we write to begin with? You know, what does it mean to engage in that work? And, you know, I would say probably 3/4 of the student, they did a little poll, a straw poll, 3/4 of the students said, I would use this as a reference, but I would feel guilty. Like, I think it's wrong if I use this to write my paper. And then the teacher, it was like, I wish I could broadcast this everywhere, but he actually showed an example of him using Chat GPT to write an essay on the house on Mango Street, except all of the quotes, when he said, okay, here are the quotes, he asked the students to go into the textbook and look for the quotes, and they weren't there because it was all invented. And the students, you know, their eyes just got wide as saucers. And so I think this is going to be, and, you know, artificial intelligence is one of Dr. Glazer's areas of expertise. I think this is going to be, you know, a big rabbit hole. It's an exciting rabbit hole, but a big rabbit hole down we go as we help kids navigate, you know, technology and the ethics of it.
Okay. That brings us up to date with current events.
Thank you.
Los Altos, I guess it's your turn.
Chat GPT.
To somebody, so it could open. So she said. Comes back in. If you look at it, you think, oh, yeah, it was the best thing you've ever done. Well, documented, you know, great.
It was funny. This was great. I ended up. You're fine.
No, it's, I use it. I use it.
I try to have laws, so I just had Bob unlock it. Try.
I should try. Like I said, someone joking and saying they were gonna apply the city council. It's a pretty good one.
We're saying if they asked them to write a cover letter or a job, or send it to HR professionals.
Hi. How are you guys? First, we just like to say thank you for the opportunity to come and speak with you this afternoon. As Terry shared, we probably will have a slightly different approach, but I think you're going to hear some really similar things. Last June, we sat down and had some time to reflect on our year, and you asked us to give you 3 highlights, 2 points of focus, and something to ponder or something that we would work on. And at that moment, you know, we really focused on our Rising Eagles, which is our CSIS kids. They did some really amazing things. We talked about returning our culture and climate because we were just coming back from COVID. And we also talked a little bit about our WASC mid-year report. As you all know, both schools really rely heavily on WASC. And so last year was our mid-year report, and both schools, I'll just talk about us, but we did well. So Mount, we did well too. The points of focus, we said you really wanted to restructure our wellness program because coming back from COVID, we recognized that we had some gaps and we had more need than we could handle at times. And so we really wanted to look at that. And then the other thing was, is we really wanted to work on welcoming EL back to Los Altos High Schools because it's been a while. And we were very excited to bring our kids that now you took very graciously because of the numbers to be able to provide kind of the best program, but we were very excited to bring them back. As we looked at some data, we went, maybe in hindsight, we would have changed some things. And so the data that we looked at kind of points us to our students' academic success, focusing on the data that you've received and some of the stuff that we've been able to gather. And we would probably flip that back to go back to Algebra 2 and attendance. And then our questions to ponder for those of you who've been at the board between Galen and I, we always talk about time. So we're going to continue to talk about time. So what we wanted to talk a little bit about today is our focus is really about kind of 4 walls that help us create a foundation. One is our WASC self-study. And when we first wrote our WASC, we had 6 goals, and the pandemic hit. We said, you know what, we really need to restructure and pull those back down. So we chose to focus on 21st century learners. We talked about equity, inclusion, and we talked about wellness. We also have the board indicators, which this is the booklet that you all have that you love, and board goals. And then we also talked about SIPSA and our LCAP. As we looked at some of those things, we recognize that our indicators continue to show that we have a very strong program in our high school. Our kids are succeeding, our teachers are doing amazing work. Just some highlights. You know, our SBAC and EL was very good, but our SBAC in math was not so hot. That's why Algebra 2 keeps coming up. Our Algebra 2 completion was down, but our 9th graders who have 2.0s or higher are up, and our number of Fs are also, we have fewer of those. So when you stop to look at what the actual data tells us, it continues to reinforce that we're doing really good things for the majority of our kids. However, there is a small subset that we continue to struggle with. And those happen to be, you know, our CSIS kids. We're finding a little bit about that with our EL students and our socioeconomically disadvantaged students. The high points are our AVID programs, our Latino students when we segregate them. And so there's a lot of really positives for us to be looking at. But there's work to do. And that's when MTSS came in. We were very excited when we started to look at the development of this, not only for just our social emotional pieces, but also attendance, behavior, and academics. And you're going to hear a little bit more about those things as we progress today. So I'm going to turn it over to my team, and I'm going to go to Kristen first. But the 2 data points that we're going to focus on tonight are Algebra 2 and attendance.
All right, so Marty spoke a lot to our wellness services and kind of where we're headed in the future, but I will share a little bit about the data that we've kind of gathered to date. So William Blair has really been leading the charge in terms of restructuring our wellness system and where we should be going with that, alongside with Marty and I kind of reviewing data and just really planning for the years to come. As you can see, it's a little bit hard, but maybe you can dig in later, but that's some of our challenge day data from the fall. So we had our juniors do challenge day in the fall, and
We have about 550 juniors, and I would say probably only about half ended up participating. It was interesting to survey them and to figure out why. Some students opted out from the beginning, some just didn't show up. And so we really wanted to figure out what was going on, because for us, this is a program that has been very successful in terms of connecting students, building empathy and community on our campus. And so we were wondering, what has happened, because this is the first time we've been able to run it in person since the pandemic. So after surveying our students, if you can see on the bottom right, and we actually surveyed our staff, students and staff that participated thought it was great. That was kind of the general comments, and that continues to be the case. But I really wanted to know the people that didn't go. Why were we not attending? What is the change here? And so if you look at our students, the top 4 reasons that for the non-attendees would be that they'd rather attend class. They were worried about what they would miss in class. Some just weren't really interested after hearing about it. And I think a big key there is feeling kind of emotionally overwhelmed to participate in something that was so intense and deep for the day. If you look at our staff reasons, kind of similar. Number 1 kind of matches. I'd rather teach class. And also the same feeling of being a little bit overwhelmed, which we have noticed as we've come back from the pandemic, with some of our staff members feeling like there's a lot more on their plates and a lot to do in terms of working with students. So this data is interesting to me because it makes me think of, a lot of people are wanting to be in class. And so really thinking about moving forward, what do we do with our SEL in terms of curriculum, and does that move into the classroom, and what does that look like? And so having conversations with different departments and just talking with our leadership team about moving forward, are there places within the school day that we can make this more of a regular thing, so it's not just kind of a one-off, really intense emotional thing. I'm very happy that our students want to be in class and that our teachers want to be in class. So we need to figure out how we can make the whole program fit together. That was one piece of data. Another piece of data was our mental health referrals. Last fall, we had about 290. This fall, we had 355. So it's about a 20% increase. So not only are the referrals coming in more frequently, the cases are more higher acuity, and there's more repeat drop-ins, the students that are coming back and returning and needing that extra support. We also have to date 23 students that have qualified for ERMs. So that's like our highest tier. Those are our top tier 3 support of students that are needing that mental health support in our special ed program. So kind of a summary, needs are going up. And so we have to figure out, we can't do all this one-to-one therapy all the time. So what do we need to look at, and how do we fill those tier 1 and tier 2 gaps? We continue to do ACT options during our tutorial time at school. The PE department continues to have spaces open for kids. We've had library activities where students interact with our librarians and are able to build things and create things in our library. And our therapists from our innovation team actually put on a whole mindfulness learning wheel where there was only not just traditional mindfulness, but mindful eating, and there was some art involved and some Tai Chi, and some of our different teachers participated in that as well. As Marty stated, we are moving forward with opening our initial wellness space late January, early February, and then looking forward to the big wellness center opening that will be happening in the fall. And so I'm hoping that that space will be for all students. It'll be a tier 1 space where students can come in and get support, and that we'll have the staffing and services for them in that wellness center. So we're really looking forward. William and Marty and we're putting together kind of a force of people that will be exploring, not only looking at our data from our temporary or initial spaces, but also looking at what other model schools are doing that already have wellness centers involving students and many different constituents to get feedback for that. So we're really looking forward to opening up more spaces that can help all students, and hopefully be on more of the preventative space that Mountain View was talking about as well.
So on the referrals, so the 355 number, and then 20% increase higher acuity. Do you know how that compares? Maybe a William Blair question, but how this compares to other districts?
I do not. I do know, from talking to other people that work in similar districts to us that are therapists, that they are seeing intense need. There's students that are coming more regularly, more frequently for support, and just higher needs in general. And so I think everyone's kind of in the same spot right now, trying to figure out what's the best way to support these students and trying to figure out the preventative versus truly needing that one-to-one support. So I think, like I said in the beginning, it's really just us filling in the gaps of the things that we're missing and hopefully trying to reach and connect all students. And then the ones that truly need that one-to-one support, we will continue to offer that.
I would point out that the percentage increase is not necessarily a bad thing. It could be reflective of a growing acceptance of getting help for mental and emotional difficulties.
Absolutely.
So we have to be careful about how we interpret that.
Absolutely. And I think it was more looking at it as we have more people coming through the door. And so instead of necessarily increasing or being able to increase one-to-one services, figuring out different ways to support those students. But yes, no, we are making sure they're being seen and taken care of regularly, for sure.
So that was my question, is refer to who? From the classroom to the counselor, or from the counselor
These are
directly
mental-
to a therapist?
These are mental health support referrals. So yes, these are just, this is data from our student support referral form that's linked on our webpage. It's around campus, and students can fill it out for themselves, each other. Teachers can fill it out, counselors can fill it out.
Right, but
parents.
like I said, then who did they go to?
That goes to these ones directly go to the intake
For the
students,
therapist.
yeah, the therapist.
So that does not fit the model of what, like Terry told us at Collaborative, that something like 5% of the students would ever technically need to go to the whole therapist level, because that is a lot of students.
So that's not people that are getting ongoing therapy. That's an initial check-in to determine which services need to be provided next. Some it may be a referral, so that intake person is very important that we continue to have, because they then determine, do they need one-to-one services, whether it's through CHAC or Pacific Clinics? Do they need to be seen by an academic counselor because it's something with a class related thing? Do they need to see an assistant principal because there could be bullying or something going on? So that's like just one initial place that we have where students can get that support. And then from there, that trained clinician determines kind of who the next steps or where it would go.
Which in the tier they would belong in?
Yes.
And which provider in which tier? They would. Okay.
Yes.
So I have a question. So 48% of the people said they heard about it and weren't interested in attending. And you also mentioned about the intensity, and also the fourth reason is I'm overwhelmed. So can you speak a little bit more about that?
Specifically about the feeling overwhelmed and then not being interested.
Yes.
Yeah, I think some of our students came back from the pandemic really wanting and thriving in the world of connecting with people and really excited about that. And I think others have been really shy and kind of on the slower progression of connecting with people. And so I think for some people, when we were describing this event, it might have felt a little overwhelming for them. Some people that specifically connected to the ones I was talking about in terms of the referrals, or that are qualifying for a special ed program due to mental health services, that day may have just been a little too much for them. And so I think just sometimes that sensory overload of having to share your emotions, because that's what Challenge Day is kind of ends up being, is sharing some things that you maybe have gone through. And so I think for some students, that's just a little overwhelming, along with our staff. I just think it was an interesting thing to see both groups pick that as one of the top reasons. And I think it shows, again, that we need more preventative stuff and more other ways to connect in classrooms and on campus, besides, which Nick will talk about later, and the different ways we're doing things on campus, besides just kind of a one-day Challenge Day event.
So if I understand correctly, you're, because I didn't quite, you're forming a plan to have this integrated, but you don't have that yet. So instead of having one day, it would be, I mean, obviously you're going to have a wellness center, but that's not until August, or I don't know when you're not gonna have that for a while. But in the meantime, you need to have something between that time and you actually have a space, right?
Yeah, so we are gonna have a similar space to the
Right,
Spartan
but
spot.
but you have to have the space built, right? You didn't happen to have a classroom open.
We actually have a portable that we're gonna be putting
Okay.
ours in, so it'll be similar. It's just not it's a little bit more off center by the counselors, but we are gonna have a space for the wellness center as well.
Right. But have more opportunities to, like Mountain View, to explore how to have it on an ongoing, sort of that calming and mental health and tier 1 support on
Yeah.
a regular basis.
Yes, we will be working together to explore what's working in that, initial space, and then where we go from there when we're creating the more permanent space.
I have one more question on wellness, and that is, how many of those referrals, and you probably don't know this detail, but might be medical rather than mental health, that could be solved if you had a nurse handy?
When you say medical, what would you,
Well, I don't know,
group into medical?
they're missing school because they have, like a female may have cramps, or somebody has a lot of headaches, or anything. What kind of, that's affecting their mental health too,
Mhm.
because they don't feel good.
Yeah, so I'm sure towards the end of the year, William will come out with more of like reasons why people are being referred. But from what I see, from the things that come through, it is more definitely mental health related. There could be as large as suicidal ideation, all the way down to depression, anxiety. We're seeing a huge increase in depression and anxiety for sure. So again, I think that's where the wellness center hopefully will have opportunities for them to build skills and learn how to cope with some of the things that are going on, so that we don't need as many, like I said, one-to-one therapists to support these kids, because the numbers are increasing. We have to figure out more ways to do that.
Just one clarification question around Challenge Day.
Mhm.
It's opt-in, and has it never been required for?
So it has
at certain grade levels.
Yeah, so it has been required in the past. We've usually done the freshman classes, and because these were the classes that missed it due to the pandemic, so we started with juniors, and it was everyone is supposed to participate. And what we saw ended up happening, like I said, either half ended up opting out or just not showing the day of, and so that's what really made me think, like, what's going on here? We actually
They would have participated much earlier.
Yes, we actually had the sophomores go today. Based on this data, we decided to do, and talking with the Challenge Day organization, we decided to do an opt-in. We ended up only having 75 or so sophomores opt in, but majority did show up. So that was the nice thing. They showed up. We had another mix of adults, of outside volunteers, or community volunteers, along with our staff. So I will definitely survey them as well and see how that was, along with the sophomores that chose not to opt in, see if we get similar results. So I will have that in the future.
Sorry, just to follow up. So if it's offered to freshmen, is one of the issues that you can't, like, freshmen generally take the same classes except for math, right? So is it more that you can't just say, okay, to the teachers, we're not gonna have class today. It's Challenge Day.
So I don't know that it has that much of an impact, because our freshmen are kind of all over the place. They do have 5 core classes that they pretty much keep together. We tend to do these on block days, so it kind of skips around. I think the pandemic has more to do with students and staff's willingness to be involved in this. I just think it's a hard space to be right now, because we've done this for 5 years, longer than that, because before Kristen got here, we were doing it. And we never had this level of dropping out. So we don't have the exact answer, but I think that the pandemic and COVID and being home and trying to deal with this stuff has had a whole lot more to do with it. So we're going to move on to Mr. Rosenberg in attendance.
Hello. I don't know if you talk into this, do it.
That's for the online. It'll pick you up.
Okay, very good. So trying to think of a really good transition from class to attendance, because there is a strong connection, as was alluded to earlier, in terms of mental health and attendance. To emphasize the through line here, MVLA is an outstanding school district. Los Altos and Mountain View do a great job for the vast majority of students, and those are students with a variety of academic strengths and areas for growth, interests, academic, social, athletic, performing arts. And so I think it's important for us to be able to focus on students who are struggling, because it's a proportionately small group, but it's a significant number of students. And the fact that we can target kids who really have needs that are not being met is critical. And what this has to do with attendance, and I've been having been with this district for 35 years, never really thought about attendance all that much, because my kids came to class when I was teaching for the most part, and didn't worry too much about the ones who weren't. It seemed like, well, hopefully you come to class. But I've learned a lot about this working with Perla and Marty and the county, focusing specifically on challenges related to attendance. A lot of this, of course, I think is attributed to the pandemic, the increase in the numbers that you're seeing there. I don't think there's any other good explanation for why we see a significant increase in kids with serious attendance problems besides the pandemic. But it's also been something that people have been talking about prior to the pandemic as something that needs to be thought about differently. A different kind of frame around the challenge of why don't kids come to school? Previously, and I don't think the board policy has officially changed yet, but there's been a lot of conversation about this, that if a student doesn't come to school, what we need is a series of more serious punishments until they eventually decide to go. And this involves the county legal system with threats to the parents, taking away driver's licenses. And that's some kind of reasonable theory, I suppose. If the kid's not coming to school, you make threats of punishment, and if they don't comply, obviously the parents are responsible, and you make threats against the parents. But we found, at least in my experience, it doesn't work very well. And it ends up targeting students who have greater needs, students of color and students of lower SES, in ways that just seem unjust. So there's been a conversation for a while now about changing the paradigm about attendance, that it's not something that you are some bad kid hanging out in the corner smoking cigarettes, 1950s picture of the hoodlum hanging out. That's not what's going on with attendance. And in conversations with Marty and other schools as well, we really felt that there's kind of two categories of students that we're seeing in both Mountain View and Los Altos that are missing class. And the paradigm shift from discipline engagement is intended to address kind of two broad categories. One are kids who have ongoing, typically diagnosed, but not always, because not every kid has access to the kind of medical care that you would hope for. And as you know, it's difficult to get mental health support right now out there in the real world. But kids who are basically school avoiding. I mean, that often present with physical symptoms of headaches and stomach aches, right? And they stay home because they don't feel well. And it becomes a very deep cycle because then they fall behind in their classes. These are often kids in very challenging academic classes. You see kids with 4 or 5 AP classes not coming to school because of these mental health challenges. The parents don't know what to do about it because it's very difficult, and they want to be supportive. And we haven't come up with a miracle cure for these kinds of mental health challenges. And there's no doubt that students who might be on the borderline of these sorts of mental health challenges were, in many cases, exacerbated by the experience of the pandemic. And so that accounts for a big portion of the kids who are missing class. So we need strategies, the kind of flow chart that Catherine was asking about, that we can provide the appropriate supports. And the truth is, and I think this is a big need that we've identified now for a while, even before the numbers began to increase, that kids who are school avoidant at this level need a very different kind of intervention that we've been able to provide. It's not sufficient to kind of reach out and communicate and warn and cajole, because students with these kinds of challenges have a level of need that's greater than we can provide right now. And I think our examination of this data and the work that we've done with Mountain View and the county on this indicates that this is a group of kids that we need to really think hard about how we can better address their needs programmatically. It's not something too simple to solve. And I think Megan Hunt at Los Altos has someone with quite a bit of background in this area, and I'm hoping that this is an area the board and the district will really focus on as an area of need, because it's, again, not a large number of students compared to 2,200 at each of the sites, but it's kids with really intense needs that we're not yet really meeting appropriately. The other category of student, I also believe really as a product of the pandemic, are students who often come to school, but are really disinterested with the whole system. They kind of got used to not going to class. They were the kids who were a blank screen on their computer during the distance learning, or just not there. Often kids who had kind of technical difficulties and other family challenges, especially school parents who were working, gone from home before they even got up and went to school. And so basically developed some pretty bad habits about what it meant to go to school, and then feel very alienated from going to school, no connections to the school system. And there's a significant number of kids at both sites. We identified them. Marty and I talked about us chasing them down around campus who were at school, but not going to class, with large numbers of absences. This seems like a problem that's easier to address in the sense that we can contact them, and it's building these relationships, the sense of connection that Marty was talking about, the sense of connection to this, an adult and the program. And so I hope you guys have the digital version of this, so you can click on the links and stuff, so I don't have to go through all. Okay, so the document that's linked there, the data-driven focus on students with critical needs, outlines a series of steps that we're intended to take that will gather the data more quickly, allow us to intervene more quickly and more intentionally, involve, as Marty was saying, more of our staff in attendance as a concern. So back in the day, me as the English teacher, like, that's not my problem. Actually, it is all of our problem to pay attention to attendance for this group of students. And this semester is really going to be the most deliberate experiment in taking some more deliberate steps in addressing the needs of our students in terms of attendance that's not kind of oriented in the old-fashioned, we'll figure out how to punish them better and then they'll start going to school approach, and instead really figure out strategies to make these connections and engagements more effective. And it's my hope that we will see both, because of the pandemic we were sitting in the past, and better strategies, that this challenge will be significantly better in the near future, because it's there's just no question. The data that you look at right there, you don't even need to be a statistician. You will see as you go down the number of attendance, the proportion of F's and D's go up. I mean, there are kids who can miss a fair amount of class and do okay, but at a certain point, no one can do okay missing that much class. And I'm sure you can all look at that and reach the same pretty obvious conclusion that being there is really the most important thing to success in school, and this is our attempt to address that issue. Yes.
Yeah. There's something I don't understand on this slide, and I think I'm misinterpreting it. On the left-hand column where it says period absences for a semester, let's just take 2019, 13 students with 60 plus. Then I go down to the next, skip 2 rows, go back to 2019. Again, it says 23 students with 100 plus. I don't get that. If there are students with 60 plus, then every one of the 100 plus students should be in that group. 100 plus what?
100 or more is what I mean.
Right. I think when you compare when you compare the 2019 number with the 60 plus and the 100 plus, the 60 plus should include the 100 plus, right?
The top number should be higher.
No, it's not cumulative. Yeah, I see what you're asking.
I mean, should the label have been different there? Like,
yeah, I should have labeled it
less than
differently.
100.
Yeah, I should have labeled it differently. So there were 23 students who had more than 100 absences cumulatively, which is a different group of kids from the. Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I understand. That's okay.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Then my question is also back to when I asked Mountain View, then what is your continuum of seeing if these children would be better placed, like at Middle College or Alta Vista or whatever?
So Alta Vista is certainly an option that we're going to do a better job with, and I think looking at the data more quickly and being willing to make that decision more quickly on the basis of kind of a clear, consistent policy about that. And Suzanne, I know, is very supportive of this early intervention with Alta Vista as an option. It's honestly, a small minority of kids. The issue is, oh, if I were just at Middle College, I would be happier. although it probably is. Offering options, I think, is a critical piece of this for students. But we do need a strategy for those genuinely school avoidant kids in the interim to get them to come to school. And at least in my experience, I think we offer them, it's not option B anymore, it's this, yeah. The online option, which is not ideal, but yes, we need to have specific choices that address the needs of these kids, some of which we already have and some of which we don't.
So I had a point of clarification. It sounds like, from what you were saying, you're asking teachers to track attendance more closely rather than just saying, oh,
Well,
this kid is doing fine in my class, so if they're missing my class, it's okay as long as they're getting a C or better.
in some, well, the concern would be the ones who are not getting a C or better for sure, but we're specifically looking at, and you'll see this if you look at the data, that there's a really disproportionate number of kids in special education who are missing a large number of classes. And so that's the particular teacher cohort we're asking to pay more deliberate attention to attendance specifically. In terms of your regular classroom teacher, I think the reporting is very good. I think the data we get, the fact that kids are absent is a thing, but more communication with all of our staff about how important it is that I think the social emotional learning and the connections that teachers try and establish at the beginning of the year is really positive. But for the kid who's not there, who then maybe begins to kind of ease back into school, I think teachers need strategies to make sure that process goes smoothly. But I think it's the CSIS teacher, the special education teacher, the kids with the special categories who need the support, but we really want them to buy into owning attendance as a part of their responsibility.
So I guess my question was more aimed, because you mentioned that kids who are school avoidant are generally the kids who are, they have a good GPA, so they start out performing well. Are you looking at sort of how to spot those kids before they're at 60 plus
that's one of the
attendances? So could you speak a little bit more about that group of kids?
Well, so one of the changes that we're making is how quickly and how kind of deliberately we're going to gather the data on kids who are missing significant numbers of classes, irrespective of which category they fall into. And for the students who, and what we currently do that isn't working well enough yet is talk about schedule changes, reducing your class load, trying to understand exactly what the barriers are for a kid like that who's missing school. And so I think for you as a board, you will be asking us these questions in June, because this is our first opportunity to kind of implement some of the stages we're talking about to see what we can do. Now, second semester is challenging for a school avoiding kid in that particular cohort, but that is what we're hoping to see change with these kids like the ones you're describing, beginning to come to class regularly.
Yeah, because it sounds like if they're there, you can actually talk to them and gather data from them directly. So from what I gather, if you can catch the kids when they're still there, but are starting to get the idea, oh, I can just not go to school altogether and I'll be okay, or at least I'll feel better as a kid.
Right.
Anyway,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I would say that for your June or even past, you have plans, or as the next phase, you would consider the repercussions of missing class, which is like 0 grades and this and this and this, and how differentiated instruction with the teacher could give them opportunities to make up classwork they missed or whatever, so they could recover, because some might think it's a lost cause. Why would I come back now?
Yeah, conveying to students that there's always an opportunity for a fresh start and ways to recover is critical. And now I'm passing it back to Kristen and talk about another area of similar
Could
concern.
I just comment before we leave? I think it's really a great idea to go from punishing people for avoiding schools to trying to get them engaged in school. But I worry that we may not be the first people to observe this, and that others have tried and failed. Have you looked at other things that have worked or haven't worked?
Well, honestly, when we started meeting with the county, I was hoping that they would have some kind of, here's what works. And they did not have, like, this is a program we've observed in a school like yours that really addressed this problem, although it is, I mean, a different problem now post-pandemic. I think unfortunately we are in the doing our best with what makes sense to us phase.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. The other thing is, the kids who come to school, but then skip periods, do they pick and choose which they'll go to? Ah, well, there must be some insight to be gained from what they pick and don't pick.
Sometimes that's the case.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay,
Thanks.
thank you.
All right, so on to Algebra 2, topic I'm excited about and love as I'm a math person. So generally our kids do really well in Algebra 2 and many complete it, and we are very happy about that and appreciate again all the support with that. Our kids are really strong in math, but we have seen a slight decline since the pandemic, specifically in certain subgroups in terms of completing Algebra 1 successfully. And so we really wanted to focus on this. At the end of the first quarter, we had 32 Ds and 40 Fs in Algebra 2. And so Wynn and I sat down with the math department and discussed, what's going on, what are they seeing in the classroom, how do we start addressing this need and this situation, as obviously as we want our kids, like we said earlier, to be A through G eligible as much as possible. And so we brainstormed a few things. Some of the things are intervening and is happening, the interventions happening in their classroom in terms of like retaking assessments, having more I would say support times from the teachers, so teachers being more available to help them, and many different things that are going on in the classroom. But we saw this as kind of an equity thing, and we needed to step in order to help these students. So as an admin team, we talked a lot about this, and we came up with like an algebra skills intervention class. And we were very specific about what students would end up in this classroom. So the identification process included working with the Algebra 2 teachers to identify what students should be in this classroom. And of course, we selected students that were not passing. The teachers shared with us sophomores and juniors, because again, we wanted them to have the opportunity to retake Algebra 2 in the future so that they could be A through G eligible. And so they shared with us their sophomores and juniors that were not passing, but we're attending and we're engaged and we're trying to be successful, and we're just really missing out on some of the skills that were probably either taught or not taught during the pandemic time. And so really just figuring out how can we get these kids back up to speed so that they can be successful in Algebra 2. Once we received these names from the teachers, Mr. Morales and I held multiple meetings with these students and talked about this as an opportunity, not as a consequence or a punishment, but as an opportunity to join this algebra skills class. We met with the students a few times. We went over what, like, similar to a course information sheet, and how they would be selected for this and how it would be a good opportunity for them. We offered the option to withdraw from the class at that time. Again, these are students that were failing, that had Fs close to the end of the first semester. And they would join the class and in hopes, again, that we would regain some of those skills to be successful next year. What this class is every day, Monday through Friday. So again, these are kids that they're looking at it as an opportunity, and they're coming to school early every morning. And so they're coming from 8 to 8:30 every day. I am their teacher. So this is an opportunity for me to work with students in a different way. And that's a picture of them. They are showing up on time and they are ready to learn. And they're really, I feel like they have this reason to be there. They want to be successful in Algebra 2. And we really talked about this is a growing experience, and the goal is for you to get back in there next year, again, as they're all sophomores and juniors,
and for you to pass this class next year. And so I'm impressed with them so far. They come in and they work hard every day. By the end of this first semester, we ended up with only 14 Ds and 6 Fs. Obviously, some of those kids ended up in my class with me. Some of their grades improved by the end of, that first semester. And so we're hoping that this is, again, just an opportunity for students to have time to excel and to be successful in math. Some of them came in really sad about what was going on, and we had a conversation that it's not necessarily your fault, right? That you were lacking some of these skills, and we explained the importance of Algebra 1 skills in order to move forward in math. And so I'm honored to teach these students. They come in, like I said, every day on time, and they work really hard. And so I'm excited to see how many are able to move forward past this class and do well next year. So that will be something we'll eventually be able to report on and see if it makes sense to continue to do something like this.
Is there, so within Algebra 2, is there, in the curriculum, is there a certain area where basically this is the obstacle within the curriculum of Algebra 2, or is it just the whole thing?
It's so speaking with the teachers, they gave an assessment at the beginning of the Algebra 2 class, which mostly kind of looked at kids' pre-algebra skills and algebra skills. And most of these kids that are in my class, they were not able to pass that. They might have gotten a 30% or lower. So they came into Algebra 2.
The foundation.
Yep, foundation was not there. And so I assessed them again at the beginning of this course, actually giving almost the same assessment, similar to what they did for myself to see it, because I needed to see what skills they had. And there's lacking, with fractions, basic numeracy skills, combining like terms, solving equations. So I've made the conscious decision to really go back through the Algebra 1 curriculum and really practice with them more, with Common Core. Now we spend a lot of time doing different pieces of math in the classroom, a lot of communication, a lot of talking projects, exploration. I did tell the students in this class, though, we're going to spend a lot of time on the procedures because we need to rebuild those skills, and they're on board, and they're, like I said, they're working hard every day. And so I'm hoping that for most of them, if not all of them, this will be a successful thing.
Can I follow up on that? The students who are in your Algebra 2 class, they have passed Algebra 1?
Yes, so the students that are in my intervention class, my skills class, they passed Algebra 1. It could have been with a C or better. Some of them did have a B because, again, they took it during the pandemic time. It was over Zoom. And so their grade looked successful, like they knew what they were all doing, or they had the pass. But unfortunately, that doesn't match up with their skills now with the pace of what Algebra 2 is. And so they're actually not in Algebra 2 anymore. We withdrew them from that class and put them into this class. So it's kind of like backtracking a little bit, but again, hopefully building that foundation so that instead of them just staying in Algebra 2 this semester, if they failed semester 1, most likely they were going to fail the second semester. And again, just having students sit in a class for a whole year and not feel successful and fail, the likelihood of them passing Algebra 2 next year would have been very, very slim. And so again, looking at this as an opportunity and an intervention.
Yeah, no, I agree with what you're doing. I just don't like the idea of students allegedly passing a preparatory course and not being prepared.
Absolutely. And I think that's what we were talking with our teachers about, what happened. And we're going to dig more into the data as where did the students take Algebra 1, where, some of them were in middle school, what feeder middle schools, what was going on. And so I think there's more to look at and that we will continue to do, but we just wanted to put something together so that we can, feet on the ground and get our kids working and hopefully.
And, what you've mentioned is not new. I mean, this has been going on for years.
Absolutely.
And, I'm glad you're recognizing the problem because it's time to fix it. Past time, really.
Yes.
I just want to say yay raw. This is a fabulous intervention situation and a fabulous way to approach it. And I've had a notion in my head many times. Why don't we have I hate to call it remedial, but a support class
Mhm.
before or after school in some of our key things.
Mhm.
I mean, you have to have the time and money, but it's obviously quite a successful option.
Yeah, I know. I'm, like I said, I'm really excited. They're coming, some days they look a little more tired than others, but they are showing up and, that was part of it. I said, if we can't, if you're not going to be here, it's not going to work. And so this is a commitment from you. And so the fact that they're showing up every day and working hard, that builds that in me too. And I'm just really excited about working with them.
I have one more question, just around, so to clarify, these students are not taking another math course.
No.
This is the math course.
And it's actually their elective credits. So this is not math credits because most of them have Algebra 1 geometry credits already. So in terms of graduation. So again, it's a pass, no pass class. So as long as they're attending and doing the work, which is kind of the main criteria, they will get elective credits for this course that will help them towards graduation overall credits, but not giving them full-blown math credits.
Nor A through G.
Yes, exactly.
So I have a question. So is it typical to give an assessment at the beginning of the year for math students? And what typically happens if they get a score that indicates that they actually didn't learn the material from the previous class?
So it's not all classes, Algebra 2, because it's kind of that space where it's all can combine or come together. They will do that. We have open access, so students are able to take any course that they like. They do get some counseling from the academic counselors and their teachers. The problem is, and this is where it gets a little bit dicey, is what Phil was saying, is if I didn't take algebra at Los Altos High School, right, but I passed it, that's a difficulty. And I usually don't take Algebra 2 till I've been out of algebra for a year. So we go algebra, geometry, algebra 2, which in a perfect world, we do something slightly different there, right? But the bottom line is that it becomes very difficult when a student comes into Algebra 2 and you go, wow, you really don't have the skills. So one of the things we do at Los Altos, we actually have an Algebra 2 skills class, and not Kristen's, right? That kids can actually take side by side. So I will take Algebra 2 with, Galen, and then I'll take an Algebra Skills with Fabian, right? And this Algebra Skills class reinforces and tries to catch me up. Many of the kids that Kristen is working with now had both of those and it wasn't working. And so that's why we're trying something different, right? And we've done a couple of iterations where we've taken those kids and started over at ground zero and then had them finish in summer school. It's just really difficult. And because we don't always control that pathway, and again, we just continue to open access. And I hate to say it's Jill, but we're going to run into your time. We still have 2 more people, so we're going to talk faster, or I'm not sure what.
So good evening. So I have the pleasure of presenting on the ELD program. Quick highlights, but really think that we want to make sure that we bring to the table and make you aware. We were very excited to bring ELD back onto our campus. I work with the registrar, so I had the unfortunate opportunity of telling many students last year that were ELD students that although this was their home school, I was going to send them across town. And of course, they're like, well, what do you mean? Do you not like me? No, we like you. But unfortunately, our comprehensive program is at Mountain View. This year, we got a lot of happy smiles. A lot of kids wanted to come back. A lot of kids, had a tug in their hearts because they became Spartans. And it was hard for them to leave Spartania. We anticipated a group of students who were going to come to Los Altos. Ultimately, they decided that they wanted to stay and continue that sense of community. But for the students that we were able to welcome, they're very excited and very happy to be with us. We were very intentional in the program that we developed. Oftentimes the team was staying past what was reasonable time of work time. They're trying to figure out where we would place certain classes just to ensure that the students were not tracking themselves, that they had a comprehensive experience, and that we were giving them the full Los Altos experience in access to a lot of great, wonderful things. And we are very successful in the way that we adapted. We were very careful in touching on certain teachers that would help us in the long run. 3 of our faculty members are part of the special ed department. So when issues of, is it a language issue? Is it a learning issue? We were able to tackle it on right away. So that has been an extremely benefit. The other thing is that, again, Los Altos being the innovative center that it is, we've had a Spanish teacher wanting to push into our ELD classes. He has a background in theater and he's doing improv with the kids. Again, just shaking it up. We have, all the cultural elements that we have in a comprehensive school that we want to make sure that our immigrant students are able to understand and immerse themselves. So the picture that you have here is of a small Thanksgiving celebration, understanding what Thanksgiving is, getting involved. One of our ELD3 oral teachers is one of our Mandarin teachers. She took them to our lunar year display today, and they were engaging in those wonderful things. So again, the diversity, the access is there. And again, we want to thank Mountain View for all the great framework and things that they share with us so that we could also be intentional and be responsive to the needs of our ELD population. We're also very happy to report that we've had great success in this short semester that we've had some students with us. We had 2 students go from ELD level 1 to 2. We had 2 students go from 2 to 3. And we had 7 students go from 3 into 4, which is our mainstream classes. So again, we're seeing some great success. The other thing that we were able to do is really dive into what is an ELD student and kind of step back as to what our perceptions are. So we had this activity about a month ago where we had our faculty come and sit and we had transcripts from all of our students. Some of them were blank because they didn't have access to transcripts. So we had to think about, okay, so what is the trajectory seen for this particular student? We had other students that surprised us with incredible transcripts. And we quickly realized, oh my God, when we translate their transcript, they're almost a 4.0 student. They're 2 classes away from earning graduation credits, but they're ELD once. What kind of access will we give them? What are some of the challenges that we have? So we had these conversations. And again, a lot of the conversations in the general faculty where there was initial nervousness in receiving the students, that quickly has dissipated because they see them integrated. The other highlight that I really want to point out is I was really worried because at previous schools that I worked at, there's always been an ELD hallway. This is where students congregate. They go get their lunch and then they're back. And it's typically right outside their English classes. This is something that we're not seeing at Los Altos. As you know, Wen likes to walk around. And she says, I can't find the ELD students, where are they? And that was a good problem to have because they're scattered throughout campus. Again, engaging in different places. Nick will talk a little bit about some of the great things that one of our ELD students is doing with the club. But again, great success, wonderful things that we're having. Again, some challenges, right? As ELD folks, we have to sometimes dive into spaces that we did not expect, that we're not trained for. Again, right now we have a couple of seniors who are wanting to pursue a higher education. The most successful thing is community college, but because of visa problems, they're looking at having to pay international tuition. So what does that look like for them? How do they access financial aid? How do we help them keep motivated and excited about their education, but at the same time face some of the realities that we have? So that's ELD. Next slide is our Rising Eagles. Again, Rising Eagles, this is our year 2. We really, again, thought extensively, hard, all those wonderful words about who we were going to tap to become our Rising Eagles teacher. First year we had Miss Battle, English teacher. She was able to help navigate the students through the English curriculum, but more importantly, make those connections with the fellow faculty and helping them understand some of the challenges that those students were facing. Where we saw the students not doing so well were in our science classes. So this year we tapped Mr. Dressen, our science teacher, department chair, to be our Rising Eagles teacher, and we've seen an increase in the performance of science. Again, that ability to be in a classroom where the lab and those questions are organically happening. So that's the Bunsen burner. Do we just what do we, right? So there's wonderful things that are happening there. We see a lot of work that we're doing, I call it Recognition Plus, that's my little catchphrase, but what we're really doing is we're going back to elementary school, where we are sitting down with kids after each quarter, recognizing the efforts, giving them a certificate that they can take home. And then sometimes we follow up with a phone call home and say, Mom, did you see that certificate? That's the first certificate he brought home in ages. again, recognizing who they are, that they're seen, that they're heard, and that they see themselves as academic potential, right? For the students that we haven't been able to really tap into that, Ms. Woolfolk has been instrumental in making sure that she opens up avenues. So Catherine, you were talking about, is middle college an appropriate place? Is Alta Vista? We provide them a buffet of options, right? We talk about middle college. We talk about freestyle. We talk about VISP. We talk about College Now. And we talk about Alta Vista. Alta Vista, we're really trying to make sure that we say, you're going away for a little bit, catching up, but the intentionality is for you to come back and graduate with us. You came here, you're graduating from here. And that has reduced the anxiety of me as a student being perceived that I'm being sent away. No. We're taking care of things and we're coming back. So at last count, I think, Suzanne, I think we sent over, we have about 8 kiddos over that are CESA students that are with Suzanne right now. And again, she's doing what she needs to do with her magic that she does. And they're slated to come back next academic school year. Okay. Again, we're having these conversations again, as Galen pointed out. We want to make sure that they see themselves as academic scholars and engage in their education. And again, give them a sense of power to make decisions when in reality, we're providing them certain channels for that success. So again, success is there. We see some intervention there, GPAs. As with our colleagues over at Spartania, we do see an increase of GPA there. In 21-22, I have 2 GPAs there. The first GPA is for our students that we identified initially. Then we were tasked with identifying a third cohort of students that would participate in the CSIS program. Those were students that were not initially identified, but met the same criteria. And as you can see, once we embedded them into the intervention, the GPA went up above a 2.0. So again, we're seeing great success in that. And again, some of them have gone on to ASB, some of them have gone into SEL, some of them have gone on to Avid and other spaces that again, really recognize what they're able to do. That's the quick and dirty on CSIS and ELA. And I'm going to pass it on to, sorry.
Good evening. So over the course of the presentation, we've talked about specific areas of growth that we're working diligently to address and populations that we're trying extra hard to support. Like Terry said at the start of the meeting, our charge is to make sure that all of our students are succeeding. And we are putting a lot of effort into that. I'm fortunate to get to work with our ASB. So I get to work hands-on with students 3 times a week and support them there. When we talk about these conversations about success, we inevitably always come back to the matter of wellness. You've heard that word mentioned a number of times in this presentation. The district's definition of success touches on this. Touches on the need for our students to find a balance between their academic and their social emotional development. I think all of us at Los Altos share that belief, and we work hard in that area. So with that said, I want to talk a little bit about clubs, activity, athletics. These are what we see as our sort of primary tier 1 preventative wellness services. So thinking of that model that you saw earlier in the Mountain View presentation, this is the ground floor. The supports, the services, the activities that all students get some access to at some point or another. At all times, when we're thinking about what we're doing in those areas, we have 3 goals. First, making sure that students have the ability to engage in whatever is interesting them. Making sure they're connecting and getting to work with one another. Only in that way would they have the opportunity to actually develop the social skills that we want them to leave here having. And then also at all times, making sure that all of our students are included.
I mean, so like in sports, how do you do that, right? Because it's limited how many students can get on a team. So I mean, you can't. So right, I mean, a lot of the sports are impacted because of that. So how do you? So if the student wants to be on a sport, but they're not good enough, right? It's basketball. It's an example, right? Very popular sport. A lot of kids playing.
there's ways that ASB is trying to address, they're not gonna make it a team, and we're pretty clear, and you all know this, that
Right.
there are cuts and that's what happens, but ASB has done a lot of stuff in terms of having tournaments, like right now, we're getting ready for badminton tournament, and they do it 3-on-1, and the other thing is that, yes, the more kids would probably like to be in sports, but we're also trying to say, hey, maybe basketball isn't your thing, maybe you should be a wrestler, because hey, wrestlers, we don't cut, right? Now, maybe you don't want to wrestle, I don't know. But there's always looking for those options of how to include kids and also try to get them to get involved in other areas. We have sports, which Nick will talk about. But yes, in high school, it becomes much more difficult to address those areas. There's no doubt about it.
That picture there is actually the top left corner. You can't see it, is a free throw contest that ASB organized. Galen's somewhere in that line. And that happened not too long after I heard from a parent who wanted her son on the basketball team, but wasn't aware it was obviously a very competitive sport to get a spot on there. So like Wynn said, we do try to provide opportunities like that. We do have a badminton team, and tomorrow starts the badminton tournament. Last June, you heard from the team, or most of you heard from the team, as far as sort of the state of affairs at Los Altos in its first year back post distance learning. And Suzanne had lots of great things to say as far as how well the campus bounced back. I think we're all pleased to really share, if you haven't had a chance to go to the campus, that momentum has been sustained, and we're seeing the campus is alive, it's vibrant, there's a lot going on at all times, which is excellent. What you see here are just some of our student-made advertisements for our class council events and our leadership program events. They've all been really successful, and what I would say is that more so than the amount of events, it's the level of participation, the number of students who are getting some exposure to them. Our last dance had a little over 1,000 people. We had on Friday, we had a pancake giveaway, and we had hundreds of students lining up after school on a Friday to hang out in the quad. The group that I'm working with this year really took to heart this message about trying to find new ways to engage new parts of the campus, and that's where we're having our first ever annual badminton, now soon to be annual badminton tournament. That was voted on by the student body in response to their request to sort of have for us to think outside the box and not always do basketball or dodgeball, things like that. I tell the students that as important as their work is, there's only 27 of them. Sarah Barado, who's works with our SEL, has another 27. And we do a lot, but we are sort of limited in what we can do in the course of the year. So I'd like to remind the students the clubs and athletics on campus are really the lifeblood of ASB. They both fall under that umbrella. And they're the ones who count way more students amongst their members, they have way more members than we have leadership students. And they're way more, they do a lot more than we're able to do in the time that we have together. You see a quick stat there. We have 142 clubs, all sorts of clubs. It's just the one that jumps to mind when I was working on this was this rhythm game dance club that I didn't even know, I hadn't heard that charter come through, but very specific interest that students made that club for. They've been busy, so we've had 72 events, fundraisers approved within the past 5 months. So they're finding all sorts of ways to keep busy. And I think for us as a district, we should be really pleased to see that we have a little over 80% of our staff serving as an advisor to one of these clubs. And we're talking about staff and students connecting with one another and getting to know each other. I think that's really significant. That entails them sacrificing lunch periods, staying after school. It's work for sure. Our athletics are obviously very popular. Last year, we had a little over 1,000 at the end of the year. We're well on track to meet that number again. Just in the first 2 seasons, we've had just under 600 students, unique students playing on the different teams. They've been really successful. You see the girls cross country up at nationals in Oregon. And then we've had a number of students who qualified or played in CCS. So students are finding a lot of success there. Again, just like in the last slide, more so than the number of events or number of clubs, I think it's significant just the fact that these students are finding communities, and when they don't find them, creating spaces. So if they can't get on the basketball team, they might make a basketball club, and that's what they use to sort of connect around that interest. And for us as a campus, we really encourage this. These are the spaces where these students are developing an identity, really developing, again, those social skills, feeling a sense of success. So I think all the resources that we pour into this pay dividends for sure, and how our students do. I mean, these are all of our students. So our low performing, our mid performing, sort of mid tier, and then our high performing students are accessing these supports. Certainly, if you walk on the campus, you'd get a sense of how this all translates into sort of day-to-day life for our students. I know we all like to look for some sort of data to latch onto and sort of measure our progress. And I would suggest we think of using school connectedness as that metric that we're utilizing. In the annual report, you'd see that sort of, I think, the second to last page for Los Altos. Students who are high in school connected, these are the students who feel like not only do the staff care about them as individuals, but they care about their success as well, and that they also feel like they belong on the campus, like there's a space for them somewhere with someone. As you can see, over the past 3 years, we've been exceeding that state average by a healthy margin, and we anticipate that to continue. Now, maintaining that momentum in that area does take a lot of effort. Again, all of us put a lot of time into making sure that these programs are all successful. Our dances take all hands on deck with the number of staff, teachers serving adjunct duty. I think as far from our perspective and from I think the board's perspective, you should feel reassured that we have partners in the students that we're working with. Like our colleagues at Mountain View said, we have students who are very, very involved and interested in making sure that their classmates succeed. I just want to mention 2 names to you and tell you briefly about their work with us last year and then this year, and how that actually translated into sort of meaningful results. Going back to this idea of inclusion that I mentioned earlier, making sure all students are involved. We have a current senior now, her name is Chloe Park. She was on site council the past 2 years. And the one thing that stands out for me from the meetings we had last year is she was the student who would always bring the team back to, great, we have the ELD students coming. What are we going to do to make their transition easier? So she really made sure that that goal was written into our site plan for achievement. And this year, she started off the year by forming the ELD mentor team, which she's the president. So like Ms. Morales said, these students are integrated to the campus. They have been welcomed warmly by these students. These students are pushing in at strategic points during the year to make sure that they're aware of what's happening so that they have a higher likelihood of attending. Soon, we're going to be having class auditions for leadership and for our elected positions, and they are planning to hold a workshop. So they're going, Chloe's done a lot of work organizing the team to make sure that what we're seeing, what Mr. Morales reported continues to happen. And here I just want to share a photo of a student I come back to time and time again. He is one of our ELD students who, with their support, was able to form a club. And so it's called the Just Let's Dance Club, and they do dance choreography. He has now reached out to try to join ASB next year. So he is sort of if we had to point to a success story, that is, he is it. Another student who is done a lot of great work for us is Betty Walton. She's also a senior. She did a lot of work last year with Suzanne, with Suzanne's help, as far as doing some outreach to her CSA students. Sort of hard to see there, but 2019, 2020, we had 9 Latino students. 2021, 2022, that dropped down to 3. And then we had to sort of rebuild, coming back to what Wynn said about rebuilding and renorming. ASB had to sort of put a lot of effort into actually sort of building up that population of the campus so that they were represented amongst their student government. And I think more important than, again, the number is the diversity represented in that 8 students. We've got 3 CSA students, we've got AVID students, we just have Latino students who are not in any special programs, and they're all doing quite well. So I think that's a success story. And we have really Betty to thank for a lot of the work that helped them get there. The application is not necessarily easy. We're trying to make it better. Chloe has actually initiated that conversation about making it more accessible. But yeah, there are 2 students that are exceptional, but hardly unique. We have lots of them, and they help us in a lot of different ways. I'm gonna pass it back to Lynn.
And just going back to our last thing that we said we'd share with you, and that is not a blank screen, but that's okay. It's continued growth opportunities. So a couple of places that we are really looking at is how do we create an inclusive pathway? And you all asked us questions about what's the next step? How do we engage these students? What are we doing? And CTE gets to be a good place for that. Los Altos has been very focused on CTE pathways. As you know, we've proven different things too. One of our concerns or problems is getting the CTE credentials. So right now, we currently have 4 pathways. One of the pathways was not current until Amber got here, and Amber helped with the COVID piece of it. We have another one that could jump off as a credential teacher. We have 3 more in the pipe that we think we can do, and then it comes down to that. So one of our continued growth opportunities is how do we expand our CTE opportunities for all students, making sure that we don't get them so high that all students don't feel welcome. We have a few of those where, you know, we started looking like, oh, this is the group we're shooting for, and then because they were so cool, and we kind of got a little inflated, and now those now it's getting. So our goal is to keep it within that bandwidth. And then Mr. Rose will talk a little bit about this.
You've heard me talk about this before. With last June's meeting, I think you all know how important it is that we provide time for professionals to collaborate around alignment, about professional learning, about improvement of programs, and currently there isn't enough of it, and it's a critical piece of what we can do together with the board and the administration and the Teachers Association, figure out how we can structure time in a way that really will allow this kind of ongoing professional collaboration. Because it's a culture and a norm we've really strengthened in the district in the years that I've been here. It's something really, I think, most new teachers would say that's what life is like here. We work together, we collaborate, but we don't have enough time to do it.
So ending on that note of time and having gone over ours got a long shot, we're sorry about that. We just want to say thank you to Terry and her team. Both schools have really appreciated the work that she's put into gathering this data, sharing it with all of you, well, most of you beforehand, and then giving us the opportunity to do this. Data collection is not easy, as you know, and Terry and her team have done an amazing job. And this year it's been really fun to collaborate. I think both high schools would say that collaborating with each other and having Suzanne, who was part of a mainstream team, now being about position, really bringing that back into the fold has been amazing. So thank you for the time to talk to you all. And again, we apologize for going over our time.
Thank you.
Before you all disperse, first of all, thank you. Great job for all of you. One request. Many of these slides had actually 4 slides embedded on them. And within some of those slides, with print so minuscule, I had to use a jeweler's loupe. As though I were looking at diamonds. It took a while for me to get there. So could you just have the individual slides printed on a full piece of paper and sent to all of us?
I did that, yes.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Especially that TS.
Well, we could see the try and our public agenda for later. No, we have to go to close now.
Any public comment?
We will adjourn the meeting. I don't think there's any public here, so there won't be any public.